everyone, to the next episode of the Inflection Point. I'm your host, TJ, and today we have a very special guest joining us. Her name is Rebecca Kacaba, someone I'm sure you've heard about because she's making waves at her company, DealMaker. So, Rebecca, welcome. Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, and thanks for sporting the swag. I love it. Representing. I'm Rebecca Kacaba, CEO and co-founder of DealMaker. At DealMaker, our vision is to make everyone own the brands they move through the world consuming. So you walk into your favorite sports stadium and you get a pop-up on your phone to invest. You walk into the grocery store and you pick up your favorite bag of chips and you scan a QR code to invest. We want ownership to be a normal part of everyday life and the everyday economy. And so we support founders on that journey as a source of capital in raising capital for their businesses.
Fantastic. Rebecca, let's start from the beginning because you know what? You were like right on Bay Street, you were a top-notch lawyer, you're a partner out of a major law firm, and then you decided to venture into the world of entrepreneurship. So tell us what that story was, what made you make that decision, and walk us through that journey.
Yeah, taking me back about 8 or 9 years now, a lot of people thought I was crazy. You know, I had a thriving practice on Bay Street, loved what I was doing. I was a capital markets attorney, a lot of the time helping people form companies, take them public, do mergers and acquisitions. But my co-founder and I saw a need in the market where we built a startups practice and the legal fees were really high to get a financing close. And there was a lot of process and securities law that was getting in the way of what I could see people just needed to get their businesses capitalized. And so we said technology is a great way to solve this problem. And we started working on it for years on the side, continuing to practice law. We had great support from the law firms we were at, thankfully, to do that. And eventually got it to a place where I could leave the practice, raise a round, and set off to build DealMaker. A lot of people thought that was very crazy, but you know, my father's an entrepreneur, so I come from a very entrepreneurial background, and I knew that this was a multi-billion-dollar industry just waiting to be uncovered.
That's fantastic. You know, obviously pivoting to entrepreneurship, you said your father was an entrepreneur, so obviously you had that entrepreneurship roots within you. What's the best advice he's given you that you reflect upon sometimes?
I think the best thing he did was when he was starting up his winery, he sent me out into the field to start up a shop. Of course, I had to do everything there. We were just getting started, but I had to start up a store, and then I also had to go do cold sales. And I think cold calling is really the best experience a person can get because you get a lot of no's, and in Canada, those no's are very polite, but they're still no's. And you learn how to pivot your talk track and eventually make some sales.
That's fantastic. You know, a lot of founders are hesitant to making that cold call because, you know, it's one thing to get no from someone, but to go up to a complete stranger and to just pitch them this new idea that I guess not a lot of people have heard about or even thought about doing is very difficult. So how do you overcome those hurdles and challenges that you initially faced in the early days?
I always tell early founders, you know, some of them like to hold their idea close to their chest. And I say, look, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution that matters. And so part of execution on an idea is pitching it. If you're going to get financing, you're going to need to pitch it again and again. There used to be an event in Toronto, I don't know if they still do it, called the Soapbox Startup. And everybody in the room would just get together and have some drinks, and people would literally stand up on a soapbox and pitch their idea to the room. And people were afraid, and it's public speaking in front of a bunch of strangers, but it was great because that's the grit that you need really to get an idea off the ground, in my opinion.
That's great advice. You know, in the early days of, you know, starting up a company, you know, especially when you come from, you know, a very established practice, you know, law, you're at a big law firm, you've got everything in place, you've got your clientele and what have you. Now you're into startup mode. So you're now the boss. You're working on trying to get clients in the door. Talk about some of the hurdles that you potentially faced in trying to get that early customer acquisition. How did you convince, you know, people to use DealMaker versus other platforms or maybe just go into a law firm, you know, and just work through them?
Yeah, in the early days, we thought we would be selling through law firms. So we did a lot of pitching law firms, and that was working my contact list, going out, doing the sales, coming back, being the customer success team, loading up the deals as well. So doing some back end work. I was really doing all the pieces of it, being a piece of product as well. And I love that aspect of entrepreneurship where you get to be so multifaceted. And it's really about focusing your time and attention on the right things. And I think having a co-founder has been really helpful for me in allowing us to constantly be talking about, are we doing the right things? For us, it was getting to revenue. I know it's not always the case for every tech startup, but for us, it was really focused on, are we creating value here for our customer? Are we getting the customer's feedback? And are we building something that they're willing to pay us to use? Because if people are willing to pay you, that is a lot different than the very early days when everybody's got feedback on your idea, but the feedback that they have is going to be different than what they're actually willing to pay you for. So my advice is to get up and running as fast as possible. If you're not embarrassed by the first product you ship, then you ship too late. So get something out the door, start getting feedback on it, and start iterating from there, and iterate fast. And then eventually always keep your mind open to pivoting. We pivoted in a couple of different ways. Law firms are a huge partner of ours in our network. We have over 400 referring partners, but they're not actually the channel we sell to. We realized when we launched the product in the early days, and the law firms were logging in an average of 8 times on a deal, and the company themselves, the founders, were logging in 25 times. And we looked at those stats and we said, okay, this is the person that really cares about what our product does. This is the person that we should actually be selling to, and they should be paying the fees. And that was a huge moment of success for us when we made that transition. We transitioned who we were selling to. The product stayed the same, but it led us down a whole different feature path that was focused on creating maximum value for the right customer.
Well, and that's a big strategic shift, actually, right? Would you say it's important for founders to pivot early or to continue down, the path that they've started on? How important is that first sort of pivot that you have to make in the founder journey?
I think it's really important. I think there is a delicate balance, you're right, that you're touching on, where as a founder, you need to know how bullheaded to be to just keep knocking down doors and get your idea done and realized, and when you need to pivot to something easier. And I would say there's a feeling I have when we're pursuing strategic relationships or sales or anything, that when you're creating value, the path should feel relatively easy in terms of what the value creation is. Maybe there's other aspects to it that are hard, but when it's difficult to figure out what the value creation is, you should probably pivot a little bit to something that feels easier.
Yeah. You mentioned that you pivoted from working with established law firms, right? You understand that customer base. It's something that you've worked. It's a group that you've worked with. To now you're working with founders, and sometimes founders may not be fully established. They might not have fleshed out their ideas, and they may be hesitant because they're also a startup. You're also a startup. So how did you get in front of these people, and how did you guys, decide that it was best to work with each other? What were the conversations you had with these early founders?
Yeah, today we work with more mature companies who are more further along in their revenue journey because they, of course, are spending money on digital advertising to raise capital. In the early days, I would say I had a lot of support from other founders who understood the journey and were willing to work with us and try the tool and pay us a little bit of money and give us their feedback. And I think the selling into the startup community is one thing I've loved about building DealMaker, because the ideas and the vibrancy and the people I get to be around, our customers, are so amazing. I learn from them every single day, and they give me advice not just on the platform, but on our business, because they want us to be successful because we're a new mode of capital for them that's helping further their business. So it's been a really wonderful journey for me in the customers that we get to serve.
That's fantastic. I noticed that you guys also made an acquisition, right? And that's also rare. I mean, you guys are still, a growing business. You started less than 10 years ago, right? and now you're already making an acquisition. So walk us through that journey. What made you decide that now was the right time to make an acquisition, and what was that journey like?
Yeah, we've done two now. We just did one actually very recently as well. I guess you could call me a deal junkie because I did start a platform for doing deals.
You're a deal maker.
So I think for us, it was very natural. We both times acquired partners that we were already working with who were using the platform for digitally marketing. And so it was very natural and easy to see how, my cheat code for acquisitions is 1 + 1 needs to equal 5 for it to be worth the effort and the money and the time it takes to integrate. And then the fit has to be there. So we were very fortunate that we knew the fit was there. We loved the teams. We could see the synergies. It was already producing revenue for our customers, which made it very natural to bring those companies into the fold with us.
Fantastic. So when I think of DealMaker, it actually sits in between. There's tech, there's regulation, and there's also finance, right, on the capital market side. So which side do you see yourselves, slotting yourselves in, and what's next for DealMaker?
Yeah, I think sometimes that's difficult about building a new category, right? As we don't neatly fit into any box when investors come to look at DealMaker, they say exactly that. Well, it's a little bit fintech, it's a little bit reg tech. You're also building a digital marketing tool. So there is a niche category of capital markets tech where we would sit. And for us, really now the journey is about refining our metrics, refining our financial projections. We let that be a little messier in the early days because we were really community backed. And so there wasn't as much of a need for us to make sure that the idea we were pitching fit into a specific category. So now it's about, as we grow a category, really building that brand behind it, which is creating awareness around digital capital, which is really the way of the future, right? Of course, if you want to capitalize your business, you need users. You might as well blend those users with an investor base and get 80% more engagement out of them and have them help propel your business forward. That's what we did at DealMaker. It worked incredibly well for us, and that's what all of our customers are doing. So creating that awareness around the category, which we're really fortunate at this moment in time where the Clarity Act just passed in Congress, and there's a lot of focus on the retail investor because in the first half of this year, they contributed over $1 billion to the trading economy a day.
Yeah, and you know what? I want to actually touch up on that for a second because the entire capital raising industry, I feel, is changing completely.
Yeah.
It used to be where, the money just flowed to a very specific type of entrepreneur, right? In the early stage, you had to be your cookie cutter, Ivy League grad, computer science, and that's who got the money. But now there is a glut of entrepreneurs, very skilled, very talented, that would have otherwise been disadvantaged because they probably didn't hit certain metrics. How are you changing that ballgame? How are you leveling that playing field? And why should, founders choose to use a community round versus maybe go to a VC, for example, or try to, spend endless amounts of time trying to raise money from a sophisticated investor?
Yeah, that's a great point and something we're really proud of at DealMaker. If you think about it, when you digitally market a raise, it's really about the idea and about the impact that it's going to have more than what a founder looks and feels like. So digital capital is producing a huge new and diverse set of founders because it's very clear what people look like is not as big a part of the equation, right? It's more than 30% of the founders who use this type of capital are minority versus VC funding goes to less than 2%. So it's a staggering difference. So that's something we're really proud of in the industry. And if you think about the impact that those people are going to start different types of businesses that are going to have different types of impacts on the world. So that's a little bit longer out. You think 10 years down the road about the impact those businesses are going to have on the world. It's going to be magnificent.
Absolutely. And you know what? One of the things that we're tracking as well is we're starting to see from an investment angle, you have a lot of businesses and a lot of focus from institutional investors going towards AI, right?
Yeah.
But outside of AI, I'd like to say there is also a massive group of what I call boring ventures. The mom and pop shops that traditionally may have low margins because they're heavy overhead, but now AI is disrupting that game. Can you comment on how DealMaker is leveling the platform and finding capital for these, long-established businesses that are not typically your venture-backed companies, but you're still doing it? For example, I was reading an article about how you guys helped a baseball team, a professional baseball team, raise capital as well. So talk to us about that journey and what that was like.
Yeah, sports is an exciting vertical for us because fans are really what the game is all about. And why shouldn't fans get to be owners? Why should it just be billionaires and high net worth people that own the teams? And there are over 100 fan-owned teams in the world. A lot of people don't know that.
Wow.
Yeah, a huge amount of the European soccer, or football, if you like to call it, teams have fan organizations, and a lot of those organizations sit on the cap table. Real Madrid, Green Bay Packers, there's a lot of big brands that are fan-owned teams. And so part of what we're doing is bringing that awareness to sports in America, where the fans can form part of the capital and they can get preferred rights like I do as an owner of Green Bay. And that's an exciting area for us to really change the game in sports. AI is hugely differentiating, as you said, for a lot of businesses, ourselves included, where there's a lot of complexity, and it can help streamline that complexity. So I think we're just scratching the surface of the impact AI can have in a lot of categories. A lot of things still people are figuring out where you can best deploy it. And so there's a lot of excitement in those businesses as well, where the crowd can see, oh, I use that in my everyday life, and I can see how AI is going to make it even more streamlined.
So you mentioned, sports becoming a massive vertical now for community raising or crowdfunding, right? What other areas do you feel are also going to benefit from fan appreciation, or your customers as well? Is there other businesses or other industries that you could think of, or even provide us with a success story that if they hadn't done this, it would have been a completely different?
Picasso is another one we're really excited about. They just maxed out their round. That is fractional home ownership, vacation home ownership for folks. So lots of different categories that we're seeing excel with community backing.
Yeah, fantastic. So, going back to, DealMaker and the journey that you've had, you've grown exponentially since you started. It's also about, we talk about connectivity, we talk about the clients, but it's also about the people within the organization. So talk to us about that key hire that you did. What was that most important hire? Because you started off as a founder, it's yourself, it's your co-founder, and then you have to go out and hire someone, and that's a really tough call. And I know as a founder myself, hiring that first employee is probably the hardest thing you do. So how did you overcome that, and what was that role that you hired for?
Yeah, the technology team, especially in the early days, was critical, and of course continues to be, because ultimately we're here to build technology. So we were fortunate that one of our investors partnered with us in that way and connected us with their team and allowed us to get off the ground with a really talented, experienced team.
Fantastic. Now, as the boss, as the one that's calling the shots in the organization, how do you realize that you're at an inflection point? Because it seems like you had a few of those in your journey. There was a moment when you started, when you pivoted from law firms to, you discovered, you should go towards founders. You made a couple of acquisitions, which you were like, this is going to be great, we got to go for it. So how do you recognize that this is a true inflection point versus it's just noise?
I think, someone said to me once, you'll look back on the journey and there'll be 3 major inflection points typically that a business goes through that really change its trajectory. And sometimes it takes a couple of years before you look back on them and realize what they were. So definitely one would have been when we pivoted and started selling directly to companies, when we made our first acquisition of the digital marketing firm. We knew it was going to be huge. I don't think at the time any of us realized how big it was going to be as we pioneered this new form of capital and made it a category. And maybe the third one remains to be seen.
Okay, well, you know what? We're looking forward to learning more about that. So let's do a little bit of a personal reflection. You've been on this journey. You've met with thousands of founders. You've met with a lot of successful companies. What was it, that one trait that you're looking for? I mean, obviously, from the companies you acquired as well, they started the business as well. What was that one thing that you're looking for in a founder that you see in this journey that you're like, this guy's going to make it, this person's going to make it, versus someone that you feel, maybe it's not the right time?
I think Jeremy, the CEO of Rad Intel, one of our customers, said it best to me recently. As the founder, you're responsible for creating the momentum. And so when I see someone who takes accountability for their raise with us, takes ownership the way he does, the way I see you do in your business, that is where it's very obvious that they're going to be able to overcome whatever gets thrown at them, because stuff is going to get thrown at you. And so you can see that grit and that accountability for creating the momentum of success, which ultimately, whatever you're doing, that's what's going to define it.
If you could if you can go back in time, 25-year-old Rebecca, you're thinking of going to law school, you've had these dreams of becoming a partner one day or do something incredible on the law side, what advice would you give her?
It's hard because, law led me to my business, so I can't say that I would skip that phase, but I would say take more risk and take it earlier. I jumped into my business when I had 2 kids under 2. My husband was working a full-time job and doing an MBA, and my law practice was booming. And so there's never a right time. I don't think you can convince yourself that it isn't the right time. If I did it when all that was going on, you just have to be willing to take the risk and jump in. And the stress you put on yourself to accomplish something is really what's going to make you successful.
So DealMaker has already shaped, how and redefined how companies can raise capital. What's that next inflection point, you think? Because you've hit 2. What do you think that next inflection point is going to be for your business?
For us, it's about making online capital mainstream. And we have, as I was saying, huge tailwinds in the market right now where people are realizing the power of retail and how beneficial it can be for a company. And we're thrilled to be getting more access to privates in this category, in something that was previously only available to institutions for everyday investors. So for us, it's about scale, growth, and awareness.
Would you say that successful founders should consider, using more community rounds? Because at the end of the day, the way I see it, customers, if they love your product, if you have very strong LTV, right? You've built that rapport with that customers, giving back to that customer and saying, you know what, you can own a piece of the pie. That's a super powerful thing.
Yes.
Do you see that as the reason why companies are now going more and more towards community rounds, or is there another reason for it?
That's absolutely the reason. That's the reason you see Figma, Circle, Gemini, Reddit, all part of their IPO carving out a portion for retail and their users intentionally, because they want to give back to the folks who have made them successful, and they know there's benefits to the business as well. It's a synergistic partnership, and today technology has made it possible. Previously it was complex, difficult to close rounds. Today technologies like ours make it possible.
You're a seasoned investor. You've made acquisitions as well. What do you think what advice would you give to someone, especially like a business owner who's thinking about taking that leap into M&A? Because that could be hard, right? There's that fear of you've made up all this money, it's hard to build that cash flow. And once you have it, you then put it into buying someone else's business. So how did you overcome that hurdle, and what advice would you give to someone who's at that particular inflection point as well?
I think the most important thing, it's easy to convince yourself that an acquisition is the right one, but you really have to look at it and make sure 1 + 1 = 5. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. It's not going to be worth doing. And you really have to make sure the fit is right, because that's what you're going to be left with at the end of the day.
What are you looking for in terms of that fit? Is it product? Is it people? What are you looking for?
Both, definitely. People, number one. We drive hard, we work hard, we need people who are good with that culture. Otherwise, it's not going to work. and it needs to be a complementary product offering. And so to the extent that I can test that before the acquisition, we always will, because you don't want to find out after the fact that doesn't work.
Absolutely. You mentioned culture. Culture is super important in every organization. How have you shaped your culture, and how has that changed over time, or has it changed over time? And can you comment on what you're looking for in your hires when you hire them?
Yeah, it's about, defining the values, define them early and for the business. As soon as you're over 15 people, I think it makes sense to write them down. And you can tweak them a little bit, but at the end of the day, those values are going to be set by the founders and the culture that you've defined at that point. And then you want to continue to make sure that as you add people, they continue to meet those cultural values. And so for us, it's about done is better than perfect, move with speed, high accountability, and today in the AI era, high AQ, so adaptability quotient. So when you're working in a growth company that's moving quickly, the company is not the same every quarter, and the job is not the same. And so you need people with a high adaptability quotient that they're going to be able to evolve with the business and see the opportunity to evolve and push that forward. I like to say the best leaders in the business are those that I can see are chronically discontent with the state of their department, and I can see that they have the aptitude to lead their department 2 years down the road for what it will be in 2 years. So all of those kinds of things are really important. They're conversations that we have a lot to make sure that everybody has the awareness of, am I really pushing and driving as hard as I can? Or am I getting complacent and just sitting back and letting others drive the business forward? So at the scale that we're at, about 150 people, it's really about building those systems and processes that drive us. Whereas in the earlier days, it was just really about living the values.
That's important. And you touched upon something really important that I want to just dive into a little bit deeper. People focus so much on and ask themselves the following question: how do I make myself an AI company? Because you get that AI multiple. But you mentioned something important. You mentioned adopting AI within your business operation. So it's not going to impact your top line. It's not going to be your revenue generator. But you're talking about using AI to improve your processes. Walk us through what that journey is like. What tools do you use, and how important is using AI tools for amongst the staff that you have in your company?
Yeah, I would say it's absolutely critical. It's one of the most important things we're focused on this year, is making sure that our team is trained up and comfortable using AI in their everyday life. We played a game recently at one of our lunch and learns where we tracked and we asked AI how much people use it. And I learned that I use AI 16 times a day. So wow. It's about knowing those stats. It's about holding ourselves accountable to what processes are taking us too long and how we can use AI to solve them. So yes, it's about building AI in our product and shifting to an AI first platform, and one that delivers things even faster than we used to be able to. So background checks, for example, are something that used to take longer, and with AI now, our platform can deliver those background checks instantaneously. Mm-hmm. So it's about enhancing our tool like that, but it's also about enhancing everyday life. So part of our departmental reviews are now done through an AI platform, so that we're getting better feedback, better criteria for managers to be giving feedback.
Do you feel that AI is taking over people's jobs, or do you see a world where AI can coexist within the framework and also with people, so that it's making their life a bit easier as opposed to just replacing them?
I don't see in a growth company like ours AI replacing people. It's enhancing them. AI is making a super adopter 10 times more productive than they previously were. So for me, anytime I would have had a question that I would have had to call someone to find out the answer, now I can just check with AI.
I was actually talking to an executive at Boehringer, and he told me something super powerful. He said, people are looking at AI the wrong way. And I said, what are you talking about? What do you mean they're looking at it the wrong way? He says, people think AI is going to replace jobs. It's going to replace people. And he says, that's not the way to do it, right? He said, at every inflection point in human history, at the advent of industrialization to everything, it's not like jobs were lost. New jobs were created.
Absolutely.
right? New jobs were created. And one thing he said that I thought was really powerful was, give AI to an A-level talent. They will build an A-level solution that much faster. But you give a C-level, person AI, they're just going to build a C-level product that much faster. So garbage in, garbage out versus finesse, and you're going to get something even better, right?
Yeah.
And we're at that, a really critical junction, right? Like when you look at it, and I was just reading the news the other day, it was like you had that sort of, circular wheel that was happening where Oracle invested into OpenAI, and then OpenAI invested into NVIDIA, or the other way was NVIDIA invested into OpenAI, and then OpenAI into Oracle, and then Oracle into NVIDIA, right?
Yeah.
So you're starting to see these loops here.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that a bubble, or is that, the start of something bigger?
I think there's something strategic and bigger at play going on there. And I know, there's different forces pushing and pulling in that. So I don't know that I'm privy to the information that's being decided there, but there's definitely something bigger going on. And, you think about the access to AI and how few hold the power of it. That's something to think about. But there's always also been different times in history where that's been true. And major power does often land in the hands of corporations. I do think that folks are going to use it to create more complex solutions, and ultimately we're going to have more hyper focus in the economy, which is going to lead to more jobs. And I can see that in our organization very much. It's going to make us even better at what we do, which is going to cause us to have more customers and be able to deploy more capital and cause that flywheel of growth to happen in our ecosystem.
Well, when you talk about capital, I mean, I think you guys you touched upon something really important, because before it used to be capital used to be very sticky. It was hard for capital to flow from one side to the other side because there's all these bureaucratic processes and so on and so forth. But you're democratizing that. You're basically finding a way for, it could be a customer or someone who's got the means for capital to suddenly deploy that faster with a company, with an organization. Do you find that the speed, the velocity of capital is going to increase? And do you feel that that's going to lead to more success, or do you think that's going to lead to more errors?
I think more capital in the ecosystem is good, right? That's going to cause better growth. And so that is good. And what Congress intended with the rules they passed was to have a more diverse capital ecosystem, because retail investors have slightly different motivations in the way that they behave from a pension fund, from a family office. And so more diverse forms of capital and that have different strategic value ultimately will be good for the ecosystem, because it balances off things like, COVID causing a big panic and then everybody selling, or different things happening in the economy that cause VC purse strings to tighten so that no one's deploying capital in 2023. So in those different ups and downs of the capital markets curves, we continued to see retail investors deploy capital into businesses, which is ultimately a great thing for the economy.
And we've seen that, like, during COVID, where Robinhood, for example, you had a massive wave of retail investors. Suddenly, they're competing with the big boys.
Yeah.
And they're influencing decisions. Like we saw what happened with GameStop, and everyone's like, all the institutional guys were like, no, we need to short this guy, and the retail is like, screw it, I love this brand. We're gonna help it. We're gonna help it grow, and they turn the tides and fortunes of an entire organization.
Yeah.
So, how important is community building now for an organization, right? Before it was like, it was you get your capital, you have your company, that kind of thing. Are you starting to see that more companies, especially emerging companies, are starting to invest more into building that community and building that rabid fan base? Because ultimately, you could see the power of that.
Yeah.
Entire organizations like, GameStop of all people, suddenly it's worth billions of dollars, and it was in the verge of bankruptcy. Yeah. And now they're doing well. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we saw it in Disney as well, right? With savvy management team in the proxy battle, retail investors coming in to save the management team and saying, no, we don't want them forced out. So we have savvy founders using us, and understanding this as a source of capital and how they can deploy it. Sometimes it's in a category where they need brand differentiation. Sometimes it's in a category where they want beta users. They're deploying it in all different ways. And for us, it's about creating more awareness so that everybody knows and it sees it as a natural part of the cap table. And retail investors get that opportunity to own the brands they love.
So, Rebecca, I wanted to ask you, you've been to Congress. You were invited to Congress to speak on behalf of, raising capital through community rounds. Walk us through what that journey was like, and how was that like a defining moment for DealMaker? I mean, you were also, I guess, an emerging company as well, and all of a sudden you're sitting in front of Congress. What was that like?
Yeah, we've been in conversations with them for a long time about the rules, and so it was a moment, a culmination of many years of conversation, and it was a defining moment for a lot of folks in the industry. I got a lot of reach outs both before and after. I think we as an industry were really happy to be there and advocating for something broader of what the industry could be versus maybe conversations that have happened in the past where people don't feel the industry is having as much impact as it could be. And so I think people were really happy to hear, and I got a lot of reach outs afterwards, that yes, like advocate for bigger, we don't need caps on Reg A anymore. We as an industry have matured past that. Please remove those. And so that's the kind of changes that I was there talking about, was how to allow us as an industry to expand and grow, especially in the face of, blockchain and all of the new laws that are being passed to allow for growth there. It's really the right time. The industry's proven itself.
Fantastic. There's a lot of frontier tech that's happening. I mean, we're talking about, you mentioned robotics. There's advancements happening, obviously, with AI. What's next in the industry? What do you think is that sort of hidden gem that's starting to materialize that you're seeing that is going to be the next big thing?
I think we're focused a lot on AI. We've just scratched the surface, and the next 2 years are going to be pivotal for unlocking the value that can really be created there. Of course, crypto and stable coins are coming into their moment as well, and tokenizing securities could be extremely beneficial. New payment rails in America, a lot of people talking about how that's going to disrupt the credit card companies and the costs of the flow of money. And so if that happens, that will be pretty transformational as well. So there's a lot happening right now with the administration, and it'll be exciting to see the technology developments over the next couple of years.
What would your advice be to someone right now thinking about starting a business and realizing that, I don't know if I can do it? Because, if you look at what's happening in the industry, I was just talking to people at Lovable, and they were talking about how that entire barrier to entry is now kind of disappeared with AI. Mm-hmm. You've got tools that are now available where people can literally start up a company with a couple $1,000s, versus before, as you know, it was like you'd need 50, 100, hundreds of thousands, maybe even $1 million in your bank account to even make that decision to jump into entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
So what would your advice be to the founders that are kind of like, are on the fence and deciding whether they should do it or not?
I think, as I said before, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's about execution, and even with AI, it remains about execution. Everybody does have access to AI, so that means whoever executes the best with it is going to be the winner. So having that grit and understanding the accountability of pushing the ball forward, even with AI, you've got to make a market, you've got to speak to users, you've got to do user acquisition. So there's a lot of different components to making a business successful, and that's what differentiates the successful founders from the less successful ones.
Fantastic. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on our podcast. And guys, if you're thinking about, even scaling up your business or starting something, feel free to reach out to Rebecca's team at DealMaker, because they've got the tools that will make you guys win. And if you've got the client base that you want to tap into that you've been using, DealMaker, like, subscribe, follow. Thank you. Take care.